Oh my god. The intercommunity. Not Russian. I wasn't trying to school.
Alright everybody, first of all, thank you so much for being here. The topic of today's event is more important than I can put into words. And basically we're here today to explain to you guys what has and hasn't been done when it comes to the university's promises to deliver reparations to the descendants of people enslaved and trafficked by the university. So first we're going to start with the land acknowledgement. The land we currently occupy was and still is the homeland of the Georgetown and their descendants, the Piscataway Conoy people. We acknowledge that these peoples and many others were forcibly removed and that this university's occupation is fundamentally tied to colonial development, and we call for land back.
So if we could have a moment of silence and remembrance for Mr. and Mrs. Harris and their children, Ned, Ellen, Martha, Sam, Louise, George, Madison, William, Edward, and Harriet, and the other souls who the university abused and exploited. May they rest in peace, and may we honor their legacy with action.
Okay, so I think it's pertinent to start today by explaining what actually happened in 1838. So in 1838, Georgetown University was in debt, and in order to get rid of this debt, the Jesuits who were in the leadership of the university wanted to sell the slaves that they owned on their Maryland plantations. And in doing so, William McSherry asked permission from his higher-ups in the Jesuit organization for permission to continue with the sale. And the Jesuit organization gave very strict terms for how the sale was to be conducted in a humane way. But when the sale was conducted, it was done so quickly, and Thomas Millady, then president of Georgetown University, went through with the sale in a horrific, brutalistic way that caused national scandal in the Catholic community and beyond. Families were separated, slaves were barred from practicing their Catholic faith, and the scandal was so great that the Jesuit institution decided to remove Thomas Millady as president. And this was one of the largest slave sales to this date in the history of the United States. Recently, Georgetown has promised tangible reparations to the descendants of those people who trafficked and sold in 1838. But since then, it has been 2 years, and as Julia can attest, none of them has seen the money.
Exactly.
So we'd just like to quickly go through and explain what has actually happened in the past couple of years. And this is kind of a visual timeline of that. We'll go through each of these events in depth. But essentially, Jojoya had announced clearly that the university would raise money for the descendants in October 2019. And obviously, today is December 1st, 2021.
So I think a lot of us remember it was about 2015 when lots of universities started reckoning with their own relations and ties to slavery. So back in 2015, President DeGioia created the Working Group on Slavery, Memory, and Reconciliation, and they recommended a number of symbolic actions as well as preferred admission for the descendants of the slaves, but they failed to include any tangible monetary reparations or any form of reparative justice. I'm sure you guys see the symbolic list of names around campus, and you see that we've renamed halls, but this group did not actually give any tangible reparations to the descendants.
So kind of trying to give like context. So I'm a senior, and the class of 2022 is currently the only class on campus that was actually a part of the overarching work, not just in kind of it was a really interesting year, because in 2018, when I was a first year, it was an intersection between the students who were originally a part of the Senate and the President's office that got the Just Res dorms renamed because they were originally named from the lady and the other administrator who was a part of the sale, and the first years who were coming into the space of even talking about the GU272 referendum. And what was really interesting about that year, it was kind of like a cataclysm in why it got so big, to the point of like national attention because you had the Democratic nominees who were talking about reparations in a greater scale. And so what a lot of people were talking about in the public discourse was Georgetown is obviously a PWI. And oftentimes when we're talking about reparative justice and restorative justice, it's based in BIPOC communities appealing, and it's coming from that. So there was a concept and a question of, well, if a PWI or a majority population of students who don't necessarily have any direct, whether because of being actual descendants of Georgetown's enslaved population or just having African American or African descent in general, which has a current nature of cultural and heritage buy-in, would that population of students buy into this concept, and would they see it as a value? And the answer was overwhelmingly yes. So it started in GUSA. There had to be a lot of constitutional and senatorial meetings and stuff to get it actually on the ballot. And the year that it was on the ballot, it was essentially, the short answer is just $27.20, which is a symbolic fee, was going to be attached to every student's tuition, and that money was then going to go to a fund that was controlled by a Descendant and student-ran committee that was going to hear different projects and donation efforts from the Descendant community and then contribute those funds. I think it's really important to note that as it stands, the GU272 referendum had the highest voter participation of any election ever in Georgetown's history, and I likely think that unless we do a referendum of similar magnitude, we'll never see it again. I believe that we saw over 60% of the student body involved in that vote, and then overwhelmingly voting yes. And so this is basically, it's a very long and meticulous document. It took a lot of nights and a lot of people's efforts to actually have it be something of value and something that could be understood in the context of applicability, not just conceptually oh, we should do something nice because slavery is bad, but the essential points are this. And the really important point, not just as in the fee, because we think that it's important to acknowledge that because the Jesuits took such meticulous records, we know who these people are, we know what they built. It's less even, this isn't charity, this is someone not paying you for your work, and that work is hundreds and hundreds of years. We know exactly what they contributed to this university, and there is a monetary value in loss, not just emotional, not just historical, but an economic loss that we owe the descendants of these people who built this university. And another really important part of it was the Descendant Committee being controlled by students and by descendants changed the narrative, and I think the whole reason that we're in this mess is because the administration took it over. It then became their responsibility, and I think that it was at its best, and it's most likely happening when it was a conversation between the students, because we are the university, and the descendants whose families built the university. But, it's actually, this is a little tangential, but it was really funny because the day before the actual referendum vote, they met with the her brother was there. They met with the administrators, met with the GU272 advocacy team, and they were like, just so you know, we do not approve of what you're doing, and we're really disappointed. And we were like, damn, that's crazy. And then the vote happened. And then it won, and then DeJoya, even though we didn't assess the fee, put out a whole statement about how proud he was of us creating this dialogue on campus.
And so the vote happened in April 2019. We were just there. Then we go to June 2019, so the summer after that spring. And here, this is the beginning of many statements in which the university kicks the can down the line and talks about plans to, at some point, start maybe implementing the reparations. Later that summer, DeJoya comes out with a similar statement in an interview with the Hoya, and this is one of my favorite quotes. He says that, if you can click one more forward, one helpful thing about the referendum was that it didn't have a timeline. You can see right here, didn't say it had to be implemented. So you can see right here in his own terms, one of his favorite parts of the referendum was that it didn't compel or mandate any university action on any timeline.
Yeah, and so I think that we lost a lot of institutional memory and momentum by virtue of COVID-19, because I think it's very hard to maintain a lot of the organizing and activism. For example, this was when they had the board of directors meetings in the summer. They had it in one of the hotel ballrooms, and we all lined the hallway and protested outside. We even spoke to the Washington Post, who covered this. And so a lot of the activism that we were able to do in putting consistent pressure to the university that even if they were empty promises, having to continually update and at least attempt to assure the student body that they were going to be doing something meaningful was because we occupied physical space. It's very hard to ignore students when they're outside of your office, but very easy when they're like miles away on Zoom. So there was a lot of activism and continual pushes and condemnations of the university, and like I think it peaked in 2019 before like the pandemic kind of put all of our campus lives on a reset. And then I had to check this is my slide. And then so what happened is, and I'm giving just context because I want people to know how low-key slimy this was. What happened is it was right before COVID kinda, and we had a meeting with Joseph Farrar and other administrators. And it was this morning, like the morning that they released this, and they were like, hey, we're not doing the referendum fee, as you know, but what if we did this fund? And the big selling point of the fund was that projectedly the referendum fee was going to raise at least $400,000 a year, and so the argument with this fund was that it's going to raise that or more. It was charity-based, which I think as a fundamental sense of like the argument of reparations we didn't agree with, and it had a little too many administrator and business stakeholders for it to be something that was wholly responsible to the descendant community. But it was at least some dimension of dynamic or economic payback. And the really interesting thing is like when we had this meeting with the administrators, we were like, okay, that's an interesting idea. I think you should open it up to a dialogue with the student body and with the descendant community. And they were literally like, oh no, we're doing it like today. Like we're just letting you know. And that's how we actually found out. And then a few hours later after that meeting, they sent out a school-wide email announcing this fund. And then they got a lot of positive coverage for it, which is a little, especially as we get into the other slides, why that's kind of heinous. But initially when the coverage was, like when the referendum fee and the referendum vote was covered, it was kind of, and I think this was symptomatic of all the coverage, there was I think the media had a very hard time drawing distinctions between what was student-led and what was administrative-led. So, because if you were here during the actual referendum fee and everything thereafter, it was an active fight with the administration. They were fully not on our side at all, and they oftentimes like condemned our activism. But from the media side, it's like, oh, they did a good thing, and then even with miscommunications as it relates to this, they're not doing the referendum fee, but there was still miscommunication with the media and assuming this $400,000 fund was what the referendum called for. And it already wasn't, and it already wasn't even in control of the descendant community by the time we were reporting on it at this stage.
So yeah, we're here today, December 1st, 2021. The referendum passed in 2019. Spoiler, no one's received any money. Julia, have you received any money?
No, nothing.
She hasn't received any money. So, let's move forward.
So just continuing on how the media was portraying Georgetown and acting like they were the best university ever and they're doing such a good deed. When in reality, to this day, they've given $0 and 0 cents to this fund. The only group that has gotten anything from this fund is Georgetown, with the good publicity that they've gotten.
So it would be one thing, and it would be a horrible thing, if the university had made a public statement saying, actually, we're not going to do the reparations we promised. What the university is doing currently is they're hoping that all of us in this room and all of us on this campus are just going to be quiet, go away, move on, forget about it. And that's not the case. We're here today, and we're calling them out. The university has tried to erase these commitments. So a lot of you in this room are students, and you receive lots and lots of emails from the provost, from the president. And so one of the emails you received from the president is no longer in your inbox. Georgetown maintains all of our student inboxes, and if you were to search this subject line, you would see this little sorry message saying it can't be found. Even further, there's a lot of news coverage, as Julia just showed you a few headlines. A lot of these articles in Vox and ABC and all these national news outlets, they link to this page on the website, which you can see up here. It says Next Steps from October 2019. It's now a broken link. Jack the Bulldog will tell you it's not there.
So we can't allow another year to pass without reparations. My brother and Nile and other students have worked for such a long time, and here I am fighting for the same exact fight. It's time to end this fight. It's time for Georgetown to atone for their past actions, to fulfill their promises, and honor the lives and the legacies of the people they enslaved.
So I think that's why I think a lot of reasons why obviously COVID-19 really complicated the organizing that we were able to do on campus, but also think a really crucial thing is that a lot of the descendants who were a part of the original organizing team had graduated. So there wasn't that aspect. I think there's one descendant who works for the administration, but like that's not helpful. So there wasn't actually any descendants on campus to be a part of that narrative. And even if you're black and you have like that similar like enslaved history in America, that's not the same as having a very unique relationship with Georgetown as an institution. So when Julia came on campus, she transferred, and we met, and we were like, you know, Georgetown relies on 4-year cycles, and this 4-year cycle is almost up. And I think that even if we're talking about how easy it is for people to become, like for me, for example, I'm talking about 2018. I came to Georgetown because when you look at their media press, as a PWI, I'm black obviously, it seemed that, okay, if they're atoning and dealing with this history, and at least in the way that the media coverage in Georgetown described it, an honest, meaningful, and substantive way, then that could be indicative of an environment where I, as a black student, even if it is a PWI, can kind of thrive because there's a culture of accountability, there's a culture of heritage and understanding. And that's just not been the case. And now we're like 4 years here, and now we have to tell first years all over again. And that's what Georgetown relies on. And Georgetown relies on us graduating, forgetting, and someone doing a senior research project and being like, you own slaves. And then them being like, we own slaves? That's so bad. And then not doing anything and then waiting for it to happen again. And at some point, I don't want to graduate and this shit not happen. I don't think there's any excuse. I think DeJoya has $800,000 in his personal banking account, let alone what Georgetown has. And so if you said you were going to raise it, you should have it. You should be able to Venmo it to Julia directly. Like, I think that's where we are at this point. And so that's why we're really excited for the work that's going to be happening. It's finals, so I'm not going to hold you. I don't think we all have the capacities to be doing the level of activism and advocacy that we really want to dedicate ourselves to. But going into this winter break and going into the spring, a lot of what we have planned, whether that's physical, public demonstrations that like kind of use our bodies as a way of articulating our dissatisfaction with the university, whether that's the petition effort, whether that's not in my personal thing, but publicly embarrassing Georgetown because that gets it to do things, not necessarily us, but people knowing that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's all going to be dimensions of the work that we're going to be doing. And obviously, we have a great team already, but I think a lot of what made the initial activism efforts effective was because we had a student body outside of those who are expected to care, who might feel that because of their identity, they do care, they have to care. Having the greater campus community is what made it powerful. So with this lovely QR code, you can sign up for the GroupMe. I hope it works. I didn't test it. But like this is going to be basically the fulcrum of everything that we're doing there hereafter. But we thought the first important step was just letting people know what happened, so we're all on the same page.
And also, if this QR code doesn't work for you, we want to make sure everybody signs in over here. We have both a petition to sign and a Google form to sign in at. So please check in over there if you didn't get a chance to on your way in.
I think we can leave this up because people might be doing it, but the next slide is just like questions. So if people had questions or points of clarification, if not, that's cool. That means we did a wonderful job and there's nothing more to say.
And Zoom, I'll speak directly to you. If you guys have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Oh, we got a question back there. Go ahead, please.
Like a few months ago, I forget if it was before or after summer. I don't remember the exact timeline, but it was at some point during 2021. I think it was in the middle of the summer, actually. Then I remember there were all these articles coming out about not Georgetown University, but the Jesuits at Georgetown and in Maryland pledging like millions of dollars for a fund that would go to descendants, but then a lot of people in the descendant community were upset because it wasn't going to direct reparations, and there were all of these like bureaucratic holds on it, and like stakeholders and stuff. Are you guys, since you're trying to deal directly with the university, is that going to be something that the advocacy team is kind of addressing, or is that something the Jesuits are doing and disconnected from DeJoya and the referendum and everything?
Can I pass this to Nile?
Yeah, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Julia, I view that as separate from Georgetown's obligations, especially because I do believe that they're a part of that overarching Catholic structure, and they donated $1 million that could have just went to the fund that they already said they were going to make. But then also even that Catholic, the whole reason, like that was really a part of why the Descendant, and Phil knows this, Phil works with me at the Center for Social Justice and stuff on GU272 related stuff. The whole actual breakdown that happened with the Descendant community at large was because they put this out, they talked to maybe 2 or 3 Descendants total, this whole Catholic structure, and nobody else who could be in disagreement, who have different perspectives and opinions on what the work was actually doing. And so that's why there's not even a lot of active negotiations between the Descendant community and Georgetown now. And even then, with all the money that was put into the Catholic institution, or the Catholic reparative justice, whatever, it still hasn't done anything with its money. It hasn't done any project. It hasn't funded literally anything for any Descendant community, let alone Georgetown's. So to me, I view it as a moot point. And I feel like we could even argue that Georgetown should pull that money out of that because they know that it's applicable and of use to the Descendant community here. So it's just like bullshit. I'm sorry.
It is.
Thank you. Shivani, go ahead.
It's like so cool, I don't know how to answer this, but just like knowing that there are a lot of American schools with ties, like direct ties to slavery and stuff like that. Do we know of any other schools that have given tangible reparations, or even if not, like any movements at other schools to give tangible reparations?
Brown University, I believe, did.
Yeah.
And then, even then, like, UVA built a monument. We got like a statue of Jack before we got anything of the Descendants other than a small plaque that I think is on the side of one of the Just Res buildings and like the TV screens.
Oh my god.
Y'all see the TV screens on leaving?
They're like slaves, and you're like, okay, it's not even a meaningful, interactive way to deal with the history.
Yeah, it's like questions, it's like a quiz, like it's not very.
And the GU272 organization, I think it was either in 2018 or 2019, they came together and like, we have the money to build a statue. Can we build a statue? And they said, nope, we're not doing that. So that's the energy they've been had.
This is a question for Julie specifically. I know, like, it's unfortunate that I believe you're the only Descendant in this room that you have to be, like, the spokesperson for the entire community. But, like, has Georgetown ever, like, directly reached out to people that you know in the Descendant community? Like, what is the dialogue with them than, like, not just the people on campus?
So there's a select few Descendants that they agree to engage with. If those Descendants are willing to play by their terms and do whatever they say, they will engage with them. Me, my family, that's not how it goes. It's not their show. It's not their way or the highway. So it's kind of complicated. But personally, they don't interact with me, don't respond to my emails, don't talk to me about anything. So yeah.
All right, if we don't have any more questions, again, I'm just going to ask you to make sure you sign the petition, get in the group me, check it at the table. And again, thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see all of your faces as we turn up on this campus.